Well, welcome everybody. My name is Glen Brand. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for Solar United Neighbors. I'm based in our DC office, and I really appreciate you taking the time in the middle of the day to talk about becoming a better solar citizen advocate. Before we get into it too much, I want to just tell you a little about our approach to grassroots lobbying. And this slide that I have up here is a nice little graphic explaining it. You probably know us, you probably came to us because we helped you go solar, or we responded to your interest in going solar through our co-ops. So we bring people together to do that, and then the crucial next step is then we educate and try to mobilize people to fight for their energy rights. So it's kind of a simple and effective approach. Before we jump right into the skills training, I thought it would be useful for Henry to talk about our priority legislation in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of important energy related and clean energy and solar related activity going on in the State House in Pennsylvania. But our priority bill is this enabling legislation for community solar. And so I thought I'd have Henry talk a little about that, and then we'll go right into the skills training, because it's important. You know, we're not doing this for its own sake, right? We're always trying to accomplish an important policy goal. So Henry?
Yeah, so the bill that is our priority for this year to pass out of the state legislature is called HB 531. It is enabling legislation for something called community solar. And you might be here in this webinar because you already know what community solar is and you're excited about it. And you want to learn what you can do to help advance the legislation. But if you're not familiar with it, or if you could use a refresher, essentially community solar, you could think of it as an alternative to traditional rooftop solar, where you put panels on your roof or maybe on your yard, and the electricity those panels produces gets credited to your electric bill, essentially lowers your electric bill. What community solar does is it allows the many different types of people who can't access traditional rooftop solar to essentially go solar. So maybe your roof is too old and you don't have the money to replace it and go solar at the same time. Maybe your roof is really shady, so it's not good for solar. Maybe you live in multifamily housing, so your roof is somebody else's floor, and so you can't put panels on it. Maybe you're a renter. There are a lot of reasons why people can't take advantage of traditional rooftop solar. And what community solar does is allows all those people to subscribe to a larger off-site solar farm that some developers build. You subscribe to a share of it, maybe a few kilowatts of it, maybe a few panels, and then you get the electricity produced by your panels, your share, credited to your electric bill. You get those electricity bill savings just like you actually had that amount of solar on your rooftop. So it dramatically expands access to solar energy, and it does it really by strategically opening up our current energy regulations to allow for these kind of community solar developments. So it's really about freeing up the market to use this technology in innovative ways. Pennsylvania would not be the first state to adopt community solar. Several other states have been doing this for years, so there's a lot of it. We don't have to be the trailblazer who figures something out. We can take advantage of what other states have learned, and that's what this legislation reflects. So we see this as really crucial because probably more than half of buildings in Pennsylvania are not suitable for traditional rooftop solar. So community solar really is their only way to get those benefits from solar energy. The status of this bill currently, it was introduced at the end of February. It is a bipartisan bill. The lead sponsor is a Republican. The co-sponsors are Republicans and Democrats. Representative Coffer from the Scranton, Wilkes-Barre area is the lead sponsor on this, but there's, last I checked, over 50 other sponsors who are supporting this bill. Currently, it's been referred to the House Consumer Affairs Committee. So if you remember your Schoolhouse Rock, the bill has to clear this committee before it gets referred to the whole chamber, the whole Pennsylvania House. And then if it passes the Pennsylvania House, the Senate also has to approve it before it gets signed by the governor. So we're in the early stages of this. It has to be voted on by this Consumer Affairs Committee. The way that happens is the chair of the Consumer Affairs Committee, Representative Brad Roy from the Meadville area up in the northwestern part of the state, he has to decide to hold a hearing and then a vote on this. He is a fairly conservative Republican and is not automatically predisposed to loving this bill, although a lot of Republicans in the House already have expressed support for this bill. So that really he's the most strategic target right now is for his constituents to engage with him about why he should be supporting this bill and scheduling a vote. But still there's a broader need for, everyone across the board to be supporting this bill, because eventually it's going to be up for a vote, if it does clear this committee, up for a vote for everyone. So, anytime talking to really any state representative is going to be useful. In addition to talking to your state representatives, especially Republicans, of course, because they're in the majority, efforts to engage new constituencies. So if you are you're part of community groups, if you have connections with agricultural groups or farmers, school districts, religious congregations, any kind of new constituencies who aren't traditionally engaging with their legislature about solar, could stand to benefit from this new way to get energy and save on your electricity bill. So bringing those voices into the conversation, getting them to contact their legislators can also be hugely valuable. And then we are expecting basically an identical bill, a companion bill, to be introduced in the state Senate soon. I don't know when soon means, but that's what we've been told, soon. So sometime hopefully this spring. That bill is going to look just like this bill in the House, and that will kind of proceed on a parallel track. So that means it's also worth starting now engaging, reaching out to your state senator and saying, I want to see community solar in Pennsylvania. So this is our priority legislation. There are a lot of other energy issues going on I just want to touch on briefly. You've probably seen news about what they're calling the nuclear bailout. So a small number of our nuclear power plants in Pennsylvania are becoming increasingly unprofitable. They're not able to compete on the energy market. And so the nuclear lobby has introduced a bill to, it's been called a bailout, because essentially what it would do is it would require utilities to buy energy from these nuclear power plants, even though it's more expensive than other power they might get. And that cost gets passed on to ratepayers in general. So everyone else would see a slightly larger increase in their electricity bills. And the argument they're making is that nuclear power is carbon-free. It doesn't burn carbon and contribute to climate change like other energy sources do. So that's why they're saying it's important to save these. The bill currently doesn't really do anything for renewables. Actually, there is no bill. There's been draft legislation leaked, but it doesn't support additional renewables. It just kind of maintains the status quo. And for that reason, we think it needs, if we're going to support these nuclear plants that are becoming uncompetitive, we need to also make sure we're putting ourselves on a path for an energy system that has substantially more solar energy than ours currently does. And then there are always efforts to update our alternative energy portfolio standards. So the set of goals we set for our utilities, telling them how much energy they need to get from alternative and renewable sources like solar. This is all kind of happening at the same time. So it may be that all of these legislative efforts somehow get merged, and there emerges some big compromise bill that saves the nuclear plants, that gives a boost to renewables, and maybe even community solar gets added into that mix. So it's important to kind of be aware of all these moving parts. But as I said at the beginning, our real priority is community solar. We think it has the potential and has already shown a lot of bipartisan support, and it can have a really substantial impact on how many people can enjoy the benefits of solar energy in Pennsylvania. So those are our legislative priorities. We have more information about those, specifically about community solar, on our website, as well as an action alert that can help you contact your representative. I'm going to hand it back over to Glenn now, and he's going to go through some actual skills and tactics you can use to help support this legislation.
Thanks, Henry. That's very helpful. So I want to say a few general words before we get right into the skills. basically two kinds of lobbying, right? There's the traditional lobbying that has a negative connotation. These are lawyers in K Street in DC and in the Capitol, state capitals. So I'm not going to talk about that kind of lobbying, and I'll give you a useful definition of lobbying in a moment, but I just want to talk about the role of citizen lobbyists. If you're a solar homeowner or you are a solar supporter, you really have a stake in the new clean energy economy. And what we have found is that people who, say if you own a rooftop system, they become very compelling and unique advocates for clean energy policies. So we want to bring that perspective to your citizen lobbying. It's important to tell that story. There's nothing like the citizen talking to a legislator saying, here are my bills. Here's how much money I'm saving. Here's my rate of return. That kind of specific information is just invaluable. It distinguishes solar homeowners, solar supporters from other kinds of lobbying voices. So if you're one of those people or you're in the solar industry, you can really make a difference. So I want to start with a definition of lobbying. And again, it's simply getting what you want by advocating to the people with the power to give it to you. I like this definition because it avoids some of the negative connotations that lobbying has. A question I get a lot, and I've been doing lobbying off and on nationally and on the state level and local level for many years, is does grassroots lobbying work? And the answer is a almost unqualified yes. It doesn't always work. And I think the better question is how can we do it effectively and efficiently? There's lots of evidence, both in research and anecdotally, of course, that grassroots pressure works. Of course, it doesn't mean it always works. So we need to talk about how to do it the best way. Just a real quick primer on how a bill becomes a law, because it's at these points where citizens can intervene. Number one, when we talk about a bill, that's a proposed law, and it gets assigned to a committee. And then that committee decides whether or not to hold a public hearing before voting on the bill. So that's where the community solar bill is right now, as Henry mentioned. It has been assigned to a committee, but we don't have a public hearing on the bill yet. Once a bill passes through a committee, it goes through the full legislative body for votes. And so in most states, there's a House version and a state version, and then they vote on the bill. Often the bills have to go through a committee if there are significant differences or so that they are resolved, those differences are resolved. And so there's one bill that the legislature votes on. If it gets enough votes, the majority of votes in the legislature, then the bill is sent to the governor to sign the bill. The governor has a choice in most states, can choose not to sign it or veto it or sign it. And if the governor vetoes it, legislators can vote again to override the veto, usually with a supermajority. And then the bill becomes law. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, or one of the few things in this presentation, I'd like you to take a look at this pyramid. And it really describes, well, I think the levels of citizen lobbying. This is both the specific tactics you can take, but I think also this represents their impact. You might notice that it goes from the easiest things to do to probably the things that take more time and resources. So at the bottom, we're talking about mass online action. So that's sending an email. Sometimes people call it clicktivism. And those are important. All of these things are important. And we encourage everybody to email their legislators, and usually you'll get an action alert from an organization like Solar United Neighbors or others saying take action here, and that's important. But to be honest, it's not as important as the ones that we're going to be talking about up this pyramid. So I think it's kind of a necessary but not sufficient way of lobbying. The next level up is personal emails or a written letter. So this is not one of those mass emails that you fill out, but instead you send personally a letter to your rep in your own words, talking about what you like them to see them, what you want them to do. There is some evidence that a letter, a snail mail letter, as they say, has more impact than an email letter. I think that's less and less the case, but there is some evidence of that. The next step up is a personal phone call. Picking up the phone. Not too many people do this. Pick up the phone, try to talk to the legislator. Often if you don't get the legislator, you can talk to a staff member or legislative aide. And they take good notes and they report those calls. And that's an important thing to do. As we go to the top tier of the pyramid, I think attending a lobby day is a fun way to lobby because you're doing it with fellow solar supporters, and you get the kind of support from an organization like ours or others in setting up the meetings with your legislator, and so that's a great opportunity. But of course, not everybody can take time out to do an event like that or to go to the State House, obviously. The next level up is a testimony at the legislature. So again, going back to the committee hearing, the committee will hold a public hearing on the bill. This is an opportunity to either email testimony in support of the bill or in opposition, whatever the position is, or if you can come to the State House to give oral testimony. And then finally is an in-person meeting. This is setting up a meeting either in the State House or in district to meet with your legislator. So that's the list. And I think one of the things I'd like everyone to do is to consider doing several of these things in the next couple of months. The more you do, the more effective your lobbying will be. Okay, so before contacting representatives, it's a good idea to learn about their background, then their solar and energy voting record, and you could just ask us. You don't have to Google search it. We can help you. But it's really good to know whether they generally are a solar supporter or a clean energy supporter or an opponent, or as in many cases, a mixed bag. I think it's also a good idea before you just either call them or write them or email. You want to prepare what you want to say. Everyone will do this according to their own style, but I generally will write a little outline for myself, kind of bullet points. And I think getting to the crux of the second most important thing that I want to say today is you really want to convey your personal story about how the bill in question will solve a problem or impact your family and your community or your business. The opposite, of course, if it's a bill that would hurt your community. You want to make that clear in terms of your personal story. Legislators get a lot of facts thrown at them, and facts are critically important to passing a bill. But generally, they spend more time thinking about how their constituents will be impacted about a bill. And so it's a balance, of course, but I think what really we can bring and what citizens in general can bring to their lobbying efforts is a unique story rather than the facts. And of course, we use facts and we'll circulate talking points and that kind of thing. So I think keep that in mind and figure out what your unique story is. Just a couple of tips. If you haven't done this before, you want to address them fairly formally by their proper title, representative or senator. You want to always identify yourself at the very start with your name, where you're from. They want to know that you're in the district, of course, their district. They're going to pay much more attention to people in their district than outside their district for obvious reasons. And I think it's a good idea to say what you do, what your profession is, what your career is. And if it's relevant to the issue, you might want to mention your organizational affiliation. So for example, if it's a solar bill, you can say, I'm a member of a Solar United Neighbors Pennsylvania co-op or other organizations that you think might be relevant. The other thing is you want to identify the bill in question by number and title. That's how they think of it. They look at dozens and dozens of bills, and they need to know some of them that have similar titles. And so we'll give you the information about the bill number and title. I think it's just you want to get right to the point when you talk to legislators. You want to explain to them how you would like them to. You say, I'm writing to ask you to vote for such and such bill because. And the because would be, again, how it affects you and your community. Sometimes you'll get an immediate statement of opposition from your representative. And I think it's good practice to express disappointment rather than anger. I think generally speaking, I mean, you're going to feel angry probably, but it's probably a better move to express disappointment. But the main point here is this next bullet point, is you want to ask them what they need, what kind of information they need to reconsider their position. And then follow up as soon as possible. This gives an insight into the thinking and also opens up the possibility of persuasion. And we can help you answer those questions. Conversely, if your representative says, yes, I'm with you on this, you just want to immediately express gratitude, but you always want to have a next ask. And so you want to ask them to consider co-sponsoring the bill if they haven't. Or you want to ask them to urge their colleagues, particularly in the relevant committee, to support your position. I think that the way to go about this in terms of tone is to be what I call politely assertive and professional. And again, you don't want to express anger or threaten people. That just doesn't make for a good meeting. And I think the other piece here is that most legislators are in their position for a long time. And so one of the goals of communicating to them is to build a stronger and authentic constituent representative relationship. You're going to be going back to them. And by increasing the trust with previous meetings, you're going to get further along in the next meeting. I think without a doubt, meeting in person with your representative is the most impactful way to lobby. And you can do this in a number of ways. You can do it as an individual. You could do it with a couple of your neighbors, and we can help find fellow solar homeowners in your district that possibly could join together for a meeting. That's more fun and also shows more power and influence for your position. You want to request a meeting at least a week ahead of time, and you want to say, when you call them up and make a appointment, you want to tell them where you want to have it, because sometimes your representatives are going to be in the State House, and the only place you could meet them is in their legislative office. But sometimes they're out of session, and you might be able to meet them in district, which is of course more convenient for everybody. If your legislator is simply not available, they're too busy, you can't get an appointment, you should immediately ask to meet with a staff or a legislative aide. And those meetings are useful. And in fact, some people report that they're more useful because one of the jobs of the legislative aide is to take careful notes and convey that information to the representative. So that is a worthwhile activity. Again, to prepare for a one-on-one meeting, you're going to do the same thing as in calling or emailing your representative. You find out about their record, their positions. I think it's a good idea to have a one-page talking points. You don't want to bring a lot of written material. Legislators have too much to read, and they probably won't read it if you bring them a 20-page paper or something or not. But if you do give them something, and it should be no more than 1 or 2 pages. It could be a fact sheet that we produce or another organization, or your own message. But again, it shouldn't be more than 1 or 2 pages. I go by a 1-page rule myself. Some strategies here. If you're like me, you tend to go into one of these meetings, or I tend to go into one of these meetings, and I talk too much. And so one of the things I need to be conscious of, and I suggest if you're like me, you do the same, is you want to allow more opportunities for the legislators to speak about their position and particularly their concerns. That means asking questions, and waiting for responses. And sometimes a couple of moments of awkward silence really does the trick. If you're alone, taking brief notes is a good idea, but it may be distracting. If you're with a partner or a couple of people, having someone take notes is usually a better way to do it. Sometimes you'll get a question. The legislator will say, well, how many jobs will this create in my district, or what will be the financial impact on residents in my district? And if you don't know the answer to the question, it's important to say, I don't know, but I will find the answer and get back to you with it. And then you can ask us for help, and we can help you answer that question. You want to close the meeting formally. Most of these meetings in person are 30 minutes, 30 minutes, and sometimes more, but usually about 30 minutes. And then you want to say that you'll send them a follow-up email, particularly if there's follow-up information. Again, in person, if your representative disagrees, and this is kind of the most crestfallen experience you can sometimes have, you really want to, again, ask them what they would need to reconsider their position. And they'll say, well, if you can show me that this is going to create jobs in my district, I definitely would be more interested. And that's what we'll zero in on and see what we could provide. And again, we're here to help. After the meeting, I think it's a good idea to just clarify your meeting notes, because sometimes it's hard to remember what happened if you wait a few days. I'm in the habit of sending a follow-up email the very next day, or even that afternoon if I have time. And I think it's important in that email to not only include the requested information if you have it, but to repeat your ask. That is, ask them to support your position. So we'll hope you'll vote yes, and we're counting on you to vote yes, that kind of language. And again, if they say, I'm with you, you want to make that ask to encourage your colleagues to follow suit or co-sponsor the bill. Now, when you send or give testimony to a public hearing by the committee, there's a couple of best practices I want to point out. One is you can email your testimony, and you send them to the committee clerk. The clerk email address is listed on the committee page. Henry or other Solar United Neighbors staff can help you find that information. And you want to ask your testimony to be distributed to the committee members. Here, it's really important to tell your personal story. The more specific it is, the better it is, the more memorable. If you're giving oral testimony, it's usually restricted. A committee has some flexibility in this, but it's usually very brief, 2 to 3 minutes, 4 minutes, something like that. You want to find out ahead of time so you can tailor your messages to fit the time. And if you do testify in person, the general practice, excuse me about that, the general practice is to bring enough copies of your oral testimony to pass out to the committee members just before you speak, and so they have it. Now, of course, if you've emailed it ahead of time, you won't need to do that. I also want to talk about another level of lobbying that we don't take advantage of as often, and it's kind of easy in many cases, and that's to write a letter to the editor or an LTE. This is particularly important from local newspapers. It's hard to get one in maybe the Philadelphia Inquirer or the large city papers, but it's a lot easier to get into community papers. Number one, they are always looking for more content, generally speaking, and also legislators pay particular attention to what's in their local community papers, particularly if you mention their name, so that you want to do that. Before you get started on a letter to the editor, you should check the word count guidelines. They're usually very short, and you don't want to waste your time and write something too long. Again, in your letter to the editor, you should identify the bill. You should just get right to it. Explain why it's important to the community, to you, and you want to name your legislator. Ask them to support the bill. That'll get their attention. One trick also, I think it helps increase the chances of getting your letter to the editor published, is to tie your letter to an article the newspaper previously published. So they like that. And if you could say, there was a solar related article, you can then pivot from that. Say you read with interest this article about solar being developed in our community, and then pivot to the bill, which will help, of course, broaden access to solar in the community. As always, if you need any help connecting with your representatives, that is set up like a meeting or with testimony or talking points, let us know. We're here to help you on this. We have a generic email address that Henry will, and others on staff will get, and that's pateam@solarunitedneighbors.org. You could also, if you're a member of the Solar United Neighbors of Pennsylvania listserv or Facebook page, which I hope you are, you can pose questions on those. But an email is probably the most efficient way to get responses. You can also look for forthcoming resources from us. We'll post this slide presentation on the Take Action page for Solar United Neighbors of Pennsylvania on our website. And also we're going to have a citizen lobbying guide, which this slide presentation is a version of, available shortly. So that'll be another resource. So with that, I would like to throw it back to Henry, and hopefully we can have some question and answers now, and be glad to respond.
Yeah, I just want to add real quick. If you if you're planning on meeting with your legislator, share that on our Facebook group. Share it on our listserv. You can find our Facebook group if you just go into Facebook and search Solar United Neighbors of Pennsylvania. One, that helps other people see that people are going out and talking to the legislators about this, and might encourage them to do the same. And also, if you share a legislator with somebody, they might be interested in joining you, and that can help make your message, amplify your message a little bit if you're showing up with one or two other constituents to your legislator's office. I see a question here from Stephen. He's just asking about the name of the head of the Consumer Affairs Committee in Meadville, and that's Brad Roy. His name is actually spelled R-O-A-E, but it's pronounced Roy, and he's represents Meadville and other parts of Crawford County up there.
Before we answer other questions, while we're it just occurred to me when Henry's talking about posting things on Facebook and so forth. If you have a meeting with your legislator, it's a really good idea to ask them to take a photograph with you. They usually love this, number one. But you tell them, I'd like to post this I intend to post this on Facebook. And of course, you can tag them. And that will get their attention as well. So it's a good idea, just a picture of you and your neighbors meeting with the legislator. It's the kind of thing that, again, they like. And then, of course, then you want to post it on the Facebook page or your own Facebook page or both, and tag Solar United Neighbors. You could do this on Twitter or other social media that you're on. So it's an easy thing to do, and I always forget to mention it, but I consider it a best practice.
And just a reminder, if you have questions, you can put them in, you click the Q&A button down at the bottom and just type it in, and that'll make sure we see it. Well, if there aren't any other questions, unless Glenn, you have anything else you want to cover?
I don't. I noticed in the chats, though, there were some good comments about people's existing efforts, reaching out to their representatives. I'm really encouraged to see that. I noticed this one here. I'm not sure who it's from, but it says it does work. I think, assuming if there's citizen lobbying, the writer means it's just, and goes on to say, just got a call from Representative Brian Sims, my rep office, that he signed on to co-sponsor. Just took a call from me. And that's that's a good example, because one of the things I want to point out is very few people contact their representatives. I think the general public thinks that they hear from people. And the truth is, except for rare major controversial things, they never hear from people. If they hear from 5 or 6 constituents, I'm generalizing here, but literally, if they hear from a dozen, that's a lot for a bill. They will be overwhelmed if they get 15 emails or calls, or have 3 constituents to meet with him. It's a very underutilized way to lobby. So that's a good example. Sometimes all it takes is just to ask somebody to do something, and they'll do it. And so bravo, whoever wrote that, but thank you for posting that.
And I want to add, these legislators are often, they're inundated with bills, and there's lots of people talking to them, generally like professional lobbyists, insiders talking to them about this bill and that bill. And so sometimes that visit from you as a constituent can be that nudge that puts that bill at the top of the stack of things they're going to look at, and highlights it as something that their constituents are interested in, rather than just one of these, many dozens and dozens of bills that they see all the time. So it is, it can be really, really powerful for us as we demonstrated. I do see another question in here, also from Stephen. He says, my senator is Michelle Brooks. She has said before that she doesn't believe that there is enough solar radiation in our area. What can I say or show her that would help to change her mind? Yeah, unfortunately, that is all too common misconception in Pennsylvania, and it is doubly unfortunate that it's a legislator who thinks this. So there's a few different things you can say, and I'm not sure what the most effective would be. One, you can point out that there are already over 21,000 individual solar installations in Pennsylvania. So there's a lot of people who are doing this already, who are earning a return on their investment. The other thing you can say is that, so while we are a fairly cloudy part of the country, we are far sunnier than the entire country of Germany is. And Germany has installed far more solar energy, generates far more electricity from solar than we do. So it's not a question of the weather, it's a question of the political will to make this happen. And I can try to find a good article to link here in the chat for you, so you can see that.
Yeah, I would also, I noticed the word solar radiation that Stephen asked in his question, and I don't know if that was the Senator Brooks's term or not, but it strikes me as an eccentric way of asking the question. And I think it's an opportunity to educate senators and representatives. They often really are ignorant of these issues, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a great opportunity to be a resource, increases your trust with, it establishes a stronger relationship with them. If you can, in a completely respectful and non-condescending way, is give them the information to answer that question, so that when they get that question from a constituent who's also ignorant of the solar resource, they'll have a credible source to respond. So thanks for that question.
Yeah, I see your follow-up remark here that she says it's too cloudy here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one, solar panels work when it's cloudy. The sun, the fact that you can walk around in a cloudy day and still see means that light is still penetrating those clouds. And the solar panels can use that light. So they of course don't work as well as they do on a really sunny day, but we also have another advantage over really sunny states like Florida or Arizona or New Mexico. Solar panels work better when they're cool. So really the best days are cool, clear days, because as the solar panels, the temperature rises, they get hotter, and they can't, voltage is the inverse relationship with temperature, so they can't produce as much electricity as efficiently as they could on a cold day.
Yeah, we used to run. I lived in Maine for a few years, and there is that common misperception that in cold places solar doesn't work, which is not true. But it was always an opportunity to talk to somebody about it. So thanks for asking that question. It's part of our role as citizens to educate our representatives.
Yeah, another useful strategy there is to look up to see where solar installations are in your community. Point out that, this business or, these homeowners that I know have done this, and they are generating electricity from their solar. And that's something we can help you figure out. We're trying to keep track of where solar is around the state. And so you can reach out to us at that PA team at solarunitedneighbors.org, and we can help you identify some solar installations in your area. Well, are there any other questions before we wrap this up? Okay, well, I think that's it, Glenn. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's great to see people interested in being more effective solar advocates, and we're here to support you in doing that. So please see us as a resource, and also when you do engage with your legislator, come back and tell us how it went, because we're always interested in that.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody, and again, I'll just reiterate my ask that you consider taking a few of the tactics, these activities that I mentioned on that pyramid, and we're here to help you do it, and really want to appreciate you taking the time today to learn more about it. Thanks very much, everybody.
Bye, everyone.